A human being could have begun his life with a simple question, yet he always chooses the one that wounds the deepest. Why does evil exist? As though consciousness, from its very first flicker, found nothing before it but that long shadow that follows it wherever it goes. Evil, that thing we cannot tell whether it is substance or emptiness, presence or absence, a truth or merely a fracture in the way we see the world. Perhaps Socrates was right when he said that evil is not a thing at all, but what does it mean for something to be not a thing when we watch it devour cities, enter homes uninvited, press its weight upon the chests of the sick, and extinguish the eyes of children before they learn how to look? Was he mocking us? Or was he pointing toward that obscure territory we rarely dare to enter, the territory of meaning, where evil ceases to be an event and becomes a question? Here at this crossroads, another voice emerges, the voice of a philosopher who tried to understand God through the world and the world through God, Leibniz. A man who believed that the universe is not chaos and that evil is not a scandal, but a riddle. And the riddle of evil as he saw it lies not in its existence but in its proportion, its scale, its place within a larger tapestry we cannot see in full. But how can a person living in our age, an age of glowing screens and dimmed hearts, accept the idea of the relativity of evil? How can someone who sees images of war, hears the cries of mothers and feels the fragility of flesh, before disease believe that evil is not absolute, believe that there is a wisdom somewhere, even if distant, even if silent? Perhaps Leibniz was asking of us the impossible, to look upon the world with an eye that is not human, to see the whole picture while we are confined to a narrow angle, a small wound, a short memory. We see only the moment that hurts us. What came before and what comes after remains closed to us, and still the question persists, pressing slowly upon the chest. If God is powerful and knowing and good, why does he allow evil to slip between his fingers? Why does he not stop the blade before it falls? Why does he not alter the path of a virus before it reaches a child's body? Why does he not place a barrier between a human being and his fate? Perhaps because evil, as Leibniz tells us, is not an independent mass, but a consequence, not a force but a trace, not a divine decree but the price of something else, freedom, movement, life itself. For a world without evil is a world without possibilities, without risk, without humanity, a world dead complete but without a soul. And yet, is this explanation enough to soothe a mother who lost her child? Enough to convince a man watching his city burn? Enough to console a body consumed by illness? Here, the mind stops and silence begins. A long silence, like standing before a door that never opens. Evil in the end is not a question about God alone, but about the human being, his fragility, his fear, his need for a meaning that justifies pain. We do not fear evil because it exists, but because we do not understand it, because we feel it chooses its victims without justice, without logic, without reason, and because we know deep within that we could be the next. In today's world where news moves faster than a heartbeat, evil becomes more visible than ever before, but seeing it does not make it easier to grasp. It only deepens the mystery, as though light reveals the shadow without explaining it. We live in an age that knows everything, yet understands nothing. An age that dissects evil, analyzes it, classifies it, but never approaches its essence. Perhaps evil, as the ancients said, is a test, or perhaps, as modern thinkers claim, a flaw in the system, or perhaps, as the pessimists insist, pure absurdity. But whatever the interpretation, evil remains a mirror in which we see our limits, our weakness, our fear, that the world may hold no meaning at all. And yet something strange happens. The clearer evil becomes, the more determined humanity grows to search for good. As though evil, instead of extinguishing us, reveals something else within us, something like resistance, like hope, like the stubborn belief that life is still worth living despite everything. Perhaps this is the secret Leibniz never said aloud, that evil, no matter how heavy, does not hold the final word, that it is not the end of the road but its beginning, that it is not the opposite of good, but what drives us to seek it. And in the end, we reach no answer. We do not know whether evil is something or nothing at all, but we know that each time we try to understand it, we draw a little closer to understanding ourselves, and that alone is enough to keep the question alive and alive without expecting a conclusion, without demanding that the world justify itself to us. Perhaps it is enough simply to keep walking, even if the path is dark, for some questions are not answered, they are lived. And perhaps evil, in its essence, was nothing more than a mirror held up to our own excessive sensitivity. This is what the philosopher calls the relativity of evil, that a human being sees only what wounds him and rarely notices what passes smoothly, quietly, without demanding his attention. By nature, we are creatures skilled at detecting disruption and blind to the peace that fills our days without announcing itself. We recognize pain the moment it arrives, yet we do not recognize health until it abandons us. How strange it is. A mild fever strikes and suddenly we long for those effortless moments when the body moved freely, as though it had been a small paradise whose worth we never understood. We only understand it when its harmony falters. It is as if happiness cannot be grasped in its presence, but only in its absence. As if evil does not lie in pain itself, but in the way it reminds us of what we failed to notice when it was ours. And yet the mind, if we wish to be fair to it, whispers something different. If we were to weigh all that goes right against all that goes wrong, we would realize that goodness outweighs it by far more than we imagine. But we do not weigh, we suffer. Stranger still is our ability to manufacture evil out of nothing. We create anxiety from emptiness, fear from thin air, disaster from imagination, and carry it as though it had already happened. The problem is not the evil that occurs, but the evil we anticipate suffering more often than not is not in reality but in the mind, not in the present but in the future. We dread. Imagine you are walking through a forest and an angry boar appears before you. Would you pause to think, there is a problem? You would not. Your body would act before your mind intervenes. For when a problem truly arrives, it gives us no time to think. We act, and only afterward understand. But anxiety is a problem that has not yet occurred, yet occupies us as though it already has. This is the evil we craft with our own hands, the evil of expectation, the evil of imagination, the evil of living inside what has not come. And perhaps this is why the philosopher says evil is relative, because we are unaware of the vastness of good we live within, without knowing. We do not know how many times we were spared, how many times the body remained whole, how many days passed quietly, without our gratitude. And what is remarkable is that those who have truly known pain, those who were ill and returned those who fell and rose again, are the ones most capable of seeing goodness in small things, as though passing through the corridors of suffering awakens within us a dormant sense, the sense of gratitude. And perhaps one must touch the wound to understand the worth of unbroken skin. Perhaps one must fall to understand the meaning of standing. Perhaps one must encounter evil to learn how to see the good. Not because evil is good, nor because it is justified, but because the human being in his frailty does not learn from light, but from the shadow that crosses over him. And so, the relativity of evil is not an answer, but a way of seeing, a way that reminds us that goodness is not absent. We are simply the ones who fail to turn toward it. And perhaps life in the end is better than we think. But we only come to know this after passing through what wounds us. But justice does not always arrive, and the innocent do not always survive, a truth Leibniz never denied. He was not the naive optimist Voltaire caricatured, nor the man who turns away from tragedy to reassure himself that all is well. Voltaire, in his sharp satire, reduced Leibniz to a comic figure, Pangloss the philosopher, who finds a doorway to optimism in every catastrophe, insisting that this world is the best of all possible worlds. But the truth is more intricate and far more severe. Leibniz did not close his eyes to evil. He opened them wide and invited us to open ours as well, not only to the darkness, but to the light. We habitually overlook his idea was never that evil does not exist, but that evil in many cases is a winding path toward good, not a justification, not an excuse, but an attempt to understand what unfolds within us and around us. Is this a numbing doctrine? Is it the same soft rhetoric some repeat about universal love, absolute acceptance, and everything happens for a reason? Perhaps, but the deeper question is it wrong? Is it wrong to say that evil often becomes a school? Is it wrong to admit that pain, despite its cruelty, carries within it the seed of a new understanding? Every fall contains a lesson. Every loss reveals something we did not know. Every wound opens a door to a knowledge we did not possess. Nietzsche, in his famous line, was not offering poetry, but an ancient human truth. What does not kill us makes us stronger. And he did not mean physical strength, but that inner resilience forged when we pass through fire and emerge from it. The virus that strikes us forces the body to craft tiny armies of defense that protect us later. The bone that breaks heals thicker than before. The heart that cracks learns to beat with caution, with wisdom, with a deeper capacity for understanding. So could evil in some of its forms be a narrow passage toward good. Could it be the price humanity pays to learn what cannot be learned in comfort? No one holds a definitive answer, and no one dares justify human suffering. But we do know one thing, that pain, when recognized and understood, becomes a key to a path we could not see, and to a strength we did not know we carried. And perhaps evil in the end is not an ending, but the beginning of something else, something we cannot name while we suffer, but recognize only when we rise. We cannot name while we suffer, but recognize only when we rise. And perhaps the simplest phrase we utter in such moments, a harm that leads to good, carries within it a philosophy far deeper than we usually allow ourselves to notice. For every time we err, every time we fall, every time life strikes us with one of its blunt lessons, that fall can turn into a teacher, a mirror revealing what we had refused or failed to see. Evil, in Leibniz's view, does not wear a single face. It has two, a sharp, immediate one that presses upon body and soul, and another that appears only with time, the face of learning, of transformation. How many of us have endured deception, betrayal, a wound that reached the deepest parts of the self, only to emerge from that experience stronger, more aware, more capable of discerning who loves us and who merely uses us. The point is not that pain is good, nor that suffering is blessed, but that pain, once understood, becomes a tool, and a tool is not loved, but it is used. This is the role of evil in Leibniz's thought, to push us toward the good, to force us into change, to show us what must never be repeated. Here, the difference between mistake and sin becomes clear. A mistake is what we fall into with good intention, what we do out of ignorance or distraction. A sin is the insistence on repeating that mistake after we know it is one. And here, evil ceases to be something in the world. It becomes something within us. A human being may err, that is natural, but if he insists on his error, he becomes the maker of evil, and he bears responsibility for what follows. A person cannot cast his mistakes upon God, nor turn his error into destiny. For if God, through Leibniz's lens, created us fragile, he also created us capable of change, capable of repair, capable of rising above ourselves. Evil in the end is not an independent force nor a dark fate, but a tool in human hands. We may use it to transform or surrender to it and become its author. This is why Leibniz says, evil is nothing, not because it does not exist, but because it has no existence apart from us. It is the work of our own hands, and if we willed it, we could bring it to an end, and perhaps life wants only one thing from us, not to fear our mistakes, but to fear failing to learn from them. For evil in the end is not an ending, but the beginning of a path toward what we might yet become. Not an ending, but the beginning of a path toward what we might yet become. And perhaps the simplest example of evil's role in our lives is the one we experience in our bodies before our minds. Whoever steps into a boxing ring knows he will be struck, knows the face does not forget pain easily, and yet he enters. When the first blow lands, then the second, then the one that rattles the skull and steals the breath, a person understands something he had never understood before, that pain is a teacher, and that the body refuses to repeat the same lesson twice. So he learns how to maneuver, how to evade, how to lift his hands at the right moment, how to anticipate the strike before it arrives. And he learns above all that pain loves no one, and that no one should inflict it on another, even if we believe they deserve it. Experience refines, suffering instructs, and the one who has felt the sting of a blow on his own face does not wish to make another face feel it. This is Leibniz's lesson. Whoever truly knows evil does not wish to remain in its company, and whoever knows pain does not wish to create it. But learning is neither quick nor easy. Hard hearts do not soften after the first strike, nor the second. Often, a person does not understand what he has done until he tastes the same bitterness he once served to someone else. We harm, then we are harmed, and then we understand. And that understanding is the beginning of wisdom. As Spinoza said, everything is cause and effect. Whoever sows evil plants, seeds that will one day grow and return to him not as punishment, but as the natural consequence of what he has done. There is no magic in this, no mysterious fate, only a simple law, action and reaction. You harm today, and you create a world that will harm you tomorrow. You plant hatred and you find it waiting on your path. You release evil and it finds its way back to you. Thus, the relativity of evil becomes not a metaphysical idea, but a daily truth. Evil and good are two faces of one coin, neither appearing except in the shadow of the other. Light is known only through darkness, and lightness only through the weight that once crushed us. And perhaps, if we made a small effort to notice what works in our lives, we would be less sensitive to what falters. If we focused on the good, evil would lose much of its power to wound us. For in the end, as Leibniz says, we do not defeat evil by staring at it, nor by chasing it, nor by trying to extinguish it with force. Looking at a thing feeds it, and concentrating on it strengthens it. We overcome evil by doing good, by multiplying it, by making it the center of our attention. When goodness grows within us, evil shrinks and loses its grip. And perhaps life wants only one thing from us, not to feed evil with fear, but to weaken it with goodness. And in the end, if evil exists, it exists because we allow it to. And if we wish it not to be, we need only choose something else.